Hi there, so welcome to the next tutorial from our last week's one where we created this wonderful atmosphere. So last week we worked with changing the value or saturation of the colours of a single colour, to create depth. So I'm just going to quickly briefly show you the colour wheel. I think we're all quite familiar with this and seen it enough times throughout our lives. Basically, there are several different patterns that we can take and use from the wheel that we can incorporate. So far we've been using what we call monochromatic. Okay, we're using one colour at a different value or different saturation, and that has been the basis of our image, obviously with exception here for this planet here that has a bit of yellow coming through. Another secondary one of these is called analogous. So this is where the selected colour that we've used, we pick one either side. Now over the coming weeks, I'm going to be introducing more of these different types of patterns that we can use in our designs, but this week we're just going to focus on the next one, which is the split analogous. Okay, where we will be using the reds, not the next ones but the ones following either side from that. Okay, excuse me. So we should end up with something like this. So I've started to add some rockery and mountains and things in the background. Obviously these can always be edited further and created a nice leafy ground in the foreground and added some trees in there, because remember my word is fungi for with mushrooms, and that's what I'm going to incorporate. So we know we want to be working with purples, reds and yellows. So today, last week we focused on looking at some photo manipulation and using textures to create these planets. Okay, now this time round though we are going to be creating the content using the brushes. Okay, so the brush tool, which we're going to be introducing you to. So I'm just going to delete this. So the first thing that I want us to do is create a new folder, and we're going to call this one Bits and Bobs, because what's really important when we're working with paintbrushes is that we're saving the colours for our palettes, to create a palette from. Now we can use the swatches tab, but I prefer having the blobs actually on the screen and being able to use a colour picker and being able just to select them from there. But the first thing we're going to do is create a new layer, and we're going to call this our avatar. What we want to do then is select our selection tool, and we're going to click style, fixed ratio, and a fixed size. We're going to go 60 pixels or 60 pixels, and we're going to select screen, and then we're just going to quickly fill that in with a black. So okay, so we can push Control D, which will then deselect the avatar layer. So Control D, as I said, that should be then be used as reference, so we can keep everything in scale. And then we're going to create a new folder, and we're going to drag that outside of there and place it in between. And we are going to call this folder, what did I call it here? Foreground. Okay, so the foreground is everything in front of our atmosphere. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is create a new folder inside foreground, and we'll rename this one mountains. Now in this, it will be good to create this sense of depth again by creating 3 or 4 mountains for our avatar to pass by in the distance. So we're going to create a new folder again inside this one, and we're going to call this one mountain, and we'll call it number 1. Again, you could call them names if you wish, but just numbered seems to be a nice workflow for me. So we are going to push the create new layer. Now, one of the tools that is extremely useful, and is also the primary purpose in but Adobe Illustrator is the pen tool. So unlike Photoshop, which relies on little square pixels, okay, like if you imagine we were zoomed into this image, at some point you'll find a pixel of a solid colour like the black box. It relies purely on the maths. So if I just use this quickly, so as you can see here, I'm drawing just a random sort of circular shape, like a little blob, and these little, what we call tangents, okay, allow us to stretch out and manipulate that curve in any way that we like, and obviously we can connect it all to make a solid shape. Now in Illustrator, this curve would remain absolutely perfect, okay, and you can keep zooming in, and that curve will never change. However, on Photoshop, it actually compensates and navigates around the pixels. So if we just delete this path, what we're going to do is create a mountain. Now zoom out a little bit. Now for the purpose of today's exercise, to keep the time down, I'm going to just create all the elements just for this section over here, okay. I'm not going to do the full image. As you can see, I've completed it here. You will have access to this file as well, but really once we've made one, it's a case of just repeating that process across. So yeah, so the pen tool for our mountains. Now we want to retain as much control as possible, so we want to make a full mountain and then move it across, and then we can always move it back or move it in and out, but it just allows us to keep control over what we're doing. So over here we can, so yeah, sorry, we could get photo reference, but I think we can just, we'll just like you to have a play around with the pen tool. So just create some curves in some interesting shapes like a mountain, okay. It doesn't matter at this stage if they're completely realistic or not. You can push Control Z if you're not happy with certain bits though as well. We can just create a nice sort of interesting mountain shape, okay, and we will finish that off by selecting it up. Okay, it doesn't have to be amazing. As I said, we're going to create this sort of vector looking image. We had the realistic sort of background, and we're going to make it more cartoony, more stylized. So once we've created our path, okay, and we're happy with it, we're going to go to the path option under here, because at this stage if I start creating a new path, it wouldn't save this information, okay. So we want to double click, and then we can change the name to mountain 1, and Photoshop will now retain this information permanently, so we can always put it back up. Okay, in a couple of weeks we're going to look, I think, or even next week, sorry, we're going to look specifically at the pen tool, okay, and go into it with much more detail than we are today. Today is more focusing on the brushes and the sort of presets and playing with those settings. So we can right click and we can go down to make selection. This turns our path that we've made into a selection that we can actually add colours and things to. So we want 0 pixels, we don't want it to be feathered, and we want it to be anti-aliased, and we can click OK. So at this stage we can go back to our layers. We've got layer 2, we'll rename this mountain 1, and we'll go to edit, and we'll go to fill, and we are going to go for our red on this scale, okay, a nice deep warm red, because this is still part of this backdrop, and I don't really want to change the colours of this. I think it's important that we keep the consistency there. So we're going to go actually for a little bit lighter, I think, and we'll build up to the dark ones. We don't want to go too warm, too rich, we want to sort of keep it still muted. So I think something around here will do. I'll click OK, click OK. So there we go, we have our first mountain range. Now eventually we're going to pull this right over here, but firstly we want to add some textures and stuff to it. Okay, so we are going to go and create a new layer, and we're going to go to edit, fill, and we're going to fill this with a white. Okay, so Now what we're going to do is actually deduct the paint away from this. Okay, now we could do that with just a normal brush and just start dabbing away. If I just go up to here, go with my normal brush and just start to rub it away, but it's going to be really hard to get that sort of, you know, that texture that we're going for, and actually doing it with a mouse is going to be really difficult. So if we go to our drop down menu, and you'll see this little arrow pointing right here, and select this, we can go down to we'll go for the dry media brushes. Okay, so we can click append, which will retain all of this information, but I'm going to click OK just to make it easier to work through. And you'll see we've got all different types of brushes, which obviously have different types of textures associated with them. So I'm going to pick the pastel on charcoal paper. Okay, and what we're going to do is just zoom in a little bit, and obviously this is on the eraser tool. If we want to paint that on, we'd have to change them on the brush tool as well. And literally what we're going to do is just start taking away at this information. Okay, now if I was to swipe this, you'll see that the pattern repeats. Okay, and I think you can almost sort of see that in this area here. You can see where it's repeating, and we don't want to do that. We need some variation, otherwise it's going to look like we have a sort of really formulaic image. So if we go to our brushes, as you can see, I've still got some of the settings staged. So this is normally what will happen. You'll end up with like a sort of smear like this, okay, or you know, the pattern repeats. We don't want to keep that. So what we're going to do is click our shape dynamics, and we're going to add some angle jitter, and that'll twist that round a little bit. How about 20%? I think we'll do there. We want a size jitter? No, I think we'll be okay. And I think no, that doesn't do much. So, and scattering, we want to add some scatter just to again create some variance, and we want to add a texture so we get this surface falling across. Okay, on the texture, should we add some? I don't think that's doing much either. As you see, we get smaller and tighter. We still want to expand that out. Okay, so I think about 110 will do. And we'll do the dual brush. Yeah, actually no, we'll try it without first. There we go. And then we get this really sort of cool looking texture happening, and each time we dab down, it's going to change the way that it is, and we can just keep dabbing that on. Okay, now the reason that we've gone with white is I had this idea about creating like a sort of snowy hill, but what we can do just initially is take away the sort of basic layer, and we can work on top of that. Okay, so obviously you can change the size of the brush, but if you change it for bigger once you've started, you'll get an inconsistency, and it'll be very obvious that what you've done, and we don't want that. We don't want to have inconsistencies. Okay, you'll notice on my mountains I tried a different thing with each one, and you know, I'm all for you experimenting at this stage on the practice one, so feel free to do that. But yeah, we're just going to keep sort of working away just so we get this sort of rocky looking surface. So the pastel brush creates a really sort of nice textured surface, and we're just going to keep going. We're almost there now, shouldn't take too much longer. Okay, so yeah, put that away. So now I think we're doing okay, but there are areas where we want to take away more and leave more present. Now the thing is on snowy hills is where there's any sort of vertical drops like there is here, they tend to be very clear. The snow struggles to sort of keep on, so we can keep working away at this section. Okay, and actually keep that sort of present, make it look like a cliff face, maybe just release a little bit there. Again, do the same for this side. Okay, and you know, we can add some other areas in as well. We don't want to keep it too keep it too snowy, but again, we can just keep working away. Once you've done the first layer, you can change the brush size, and work at a much higher scale. in that and actually speed it up. Okay, or you can obviously decrease it as well. So now we've deducted that information away, I still want to make it actually a bit brighter up in these areas. Okay, so what I'm going to do is select the brush tool, and again drop down menu, go to the right, and add our dry media brushes to this one as well. I'm not going to append again, just to keep things easier to work with. And we're going to click the pastel and charcoal, and okay, we're going to start painting on. Now before we start, make sure you get the right colour. Secondly, I've left this selected. Obviously if I deselect, I'm going to start painting above the mountain, and we don't want to do that. So we're just going to click undo. There we go. And we're going to start, we need to make sure it's selected, and we're going to start painting on. Okay, so we're going to create that quite a snowy peak. Again, sort of all around here, just to keep this on. So at this stage we're not going to see too much repetition, okay, within the actual surface, because we have already painted that layer on. Now I could actually go to the settings and do that again, but I think it's retained them, hasn't it? Yeah, that's great. So we don't actually need to do that. Now obviously the vertical drop, we're not going to see much, but we're going to see much more around here. We should probably won't even see this information down here anyway once we get all the other things in, but it's good just in case there is a part later on in the game, in the development, if I decide to keep a bit exposed, we will still have some visual information there. Okay, so we're just going to bring this in and actually give it a bit more depth. There we go. Now it's starting to look like an actual physical form, okay, that's actually in the hill. And again, we're just going to bring a little bit down here, I think. Okay, actually, so yeah, there we go. And then bring this in, create like a valley, and like I say, it's this should be really useful if you actually, with the mouse, there's a lot of clicking around, but we're dabbing, we're going to dab this detailed information on, but I think it's working quite nicely. So I think I'm quite happy with that at this stage. And what I'm going to do is go to a screen again, take that down a little bit. But yeah, it's a little bit dark, I think. There we may take it to about 80. We can always change that later on as well. And what we're going to do is bring this, oh my bad, select the whole folder, because we want to move everything in the folder and we can't do that, so we'll select both of these, okay, by holding shift, and then we'll drag this across and we'll just sit it in here. Okay, now I'm going to push Control D, and what we're going to do is just call this, rename this surface texture, and we'll call it Mountain 1. A bit difficult to see, read actually there, so you know what, we'll take away Mountain 1, just to maintain that level of control. So what we want to do as well is create a new layer, and so we want to create a new folder, because we want to create another mountain, because I'm going to show you how to create this sense of this idea of depth, and we'll call this one Mountain 2. And again, we're going to go to our pen tool, and we're just going to create a full mountain throughout. Remember to drag, because we do want it to be a bit smooth. I don't want it to be all with sharp corners. If we were doing close up with lots of sort of detail and stuff in there, then maybe we would have done it that way, but we're not. So in fact, I'm going to create a nice little sort of quirky sort of cliff face down here. Okay, because some nice bit of interesting drops. So don't be afraid to be interesting with the shapes, and we'll build that across there. Again, go to our paths tool, double click, because we want to maintain that shape. We want to keep it there in case anything goes wrong, so we can go back to it, save having to rework on that process again. Go back to our layers tab, and go back to our path tab, and click make selection, right click, make selection, and that will turn that into a lovely selection. We can create a new layer, and we can go to edit, and we can go to fill, and because this one is slightly closer, we are going to go and make it a little bit warmer. Okay, so click OK, and there we go. So can keep this selected again. We'll quickly rename that. Names into, remember, good workflow, and I know I stress this importance every week, but we really do need to keep on top of this. It's something that's going to be absolutely essential once you're working in a big team. And we'll call this one surface texture, and this time I want to call it surface texture 1 because we want to do two things here, and just to create a little bit of extra detail using the brushes. So we're going to go back to our brushes tab, and this time we are literally going to build up on top. Okay, now I suggest for consistency, once you've worked out what sort of style mountain you want to do, that you maintain that on every mountain. Okay, and I'm going to try this time with the crayon. Okay, let's have a look at this. So again, it's still remembering those settings from before. Okay, let me just zoom in. I want to take a look at that texture. Okay, so the resolution isn't too great, so we'll make the brush big. In fact, rather than do that, we're just going to rub this stuff out just to keep it a bit quicker. And we'll go back to our brush, we'll make it super huge so I can just see what that texture's like. Cool. So yeah, in fact that could work, I think. So what we're going to do now, the thing to remember is with a graphics tablet, they are pressure sensitive, so here you'll see a different intensity. If you're working with a mouse, you may find that you struggle to get that variation, which isn't a massive issue, because you'll still be able to achieve the effect, but obviously it shows, you know, the importance of actually getting that tablet later on down the line. So what we're going to do as well is change the eraser, because I just want to take a little bit away from that as well. So we'll go to the eraser, and you know, you can mix these together. You can take away with this brush as well, but I'm just going to keep it with these. Just want you to get used to the idea of using different brushes and remembering where they are. You can create a new preset here, but obviously once you don't append capture brush and preset, and you can rename it, it should save it to this layout, which you can also access here, but as I said, once you add a new brush set to it, if you don't append it, I'm not sure if it saves it. I'm pretty sure it does, but it's always worth creating just a new document and keeping that information on there. So we're just going to take it away from here a little bit. Okay, just so we don't want it to be too white in these areas, because we are going to add another layer on top. Okay, and so yeah, cool. So once we've done that, I'm just going to add another quick little bit on there. Once we've done that, we're going to go to not hue, but we are, if you push up on it, once you've clicked on this, you push on the up arrows. Okay, you can actually, you know, skip quite quickly through for different ones. Overlay, so you could go lighter and treat the normal background as a dark, or you could go to subtract, which is what I'm going to do, and just take the opacity down just to about 35%, I think. So you've got a nice sort of rocky texture underneath. And what we're going to do as well is try and paint, think about this overall shape. So if we now create a new layer, and we'll call this surface texture 2, and what we're going to do is get the brush tool and obviously keep it on white, and this time we're going to select soft oil pastel. So let's take a look at this one. Let's turn that up a little bit. Okay, cool. So again, similar sort of effects as this, but this one looks as though it's retaining paper information, and this one looks a lot softer. So we are going to start to imagine that the snow's been coming down as we did over here. So on these peaky parts, it's going to be really, you know, like a snow sort of falling down, presumably coming around here. Okay, and obviously on the peak of that. Okay, I think at these bits we can drag a little bit just to build in that white, get it really sort of set. Okay, and I think here, you know, once we get to there, these bits going down, you know, we might get a tiny bit. So you see here how thick this is? That's too thick. I don't want that much showing in that area, so we'll come back to that. In fact, we'll just start getting it along here, and we'll just start building, you know, this idea that the snow has been falling quite around these bits, and actually that these are quite straight down. And again, you know, there's that little drop there that we can sort of argue that might not have that much thrown on it, but we'll keep that visible as well. I quite like the idea of keeping that out, actually showing the shape of the mountain side. So it takes a little bit of a while to do, but we'll get there quite quickly, quite nicely. And remember, the one important thing is we're keeping the consistency with the background. So the colour profiles are really important, and you know, being really subtle with a change of colour. As I said the other week, one of the things that I was seeing from the 2D project was, you know, a lot of really strong colours being thrown in, and there's nowhere for the eyes to rest. And yeah, you know, it's too much. So we're going to make this brush really big now for this next part, and as you can see, what happens is it becomes quite blurred, and we get that inconsistency in the size. So that's what I was saying earlier. So I think I was on about 30, 40, yeah, something like that. That'll do. And we can go to our scattering, I think, and if we put our scattering up, I'm hoping that will create some depth. And no, it's not going to do that, is it? I think there we go. Let's have a look. How does no? Okay, so if we put both axes, now it makes it thicker. Let's just have a look at the angle jitter, no. Roundness, size jitter, no. Okay, so we might struggle here, so what we're going to do is build on, and we're going to take away using that deductive process. Okay, I think that's going to be our best sort of shout. So we don't want to put too much down, because that means we're going to have to take more away, but we do want to just sort of get an even sort of coverage at this stage. We can build that up and on, and we can go to our eraser, and we definitely don't want to be using that, so we go back to our soft oil pastel, keep the consistency there, and we can start to take away, okay, and show that there are bits of snow on there, but actually, you know what, there's not that much on this area. Don't forget, we're going to, you know, we're going to reduce the intensity of this white as well, because, you know, it's very strong. So we're just going to keep working away at this. I think we might even go for one more sweep over, because we want some of that information underneath to be shown through. We don't want it to just be white. Okay, we can, you know, keep that there. Actually, we might just take away some of these bits on here just to, you know, keep that. So apologies for that there, I've been having some microphone trouble, it just cut off again. So yeah, so we're going to just take away, add some little bits more around here, just where it's come away, where it's taken away a bit too much, and I think right in there is going to be quite a nice sort of definition point. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that, and what we're going to do, we'll just quickly try multiply our screen and take down the opacity again. Okay, obviously this one is more closer to us, which is why it's a warmer colour, but what we're going to do is just we want the white to be more intense than that, to sort of show that closeness. So we're going to take it down to 85, I think. Okay, for now, and we're going to click OK, Control Z, Control D, sorry, not Control Z, just take it away. So what I want to do now, as you can see, we've got two different style mountains, but ideally what we would do is have a similar style. So I think we're just going to add a little bit more, actually looking on that, we're going to add a little bit more white around here. Okay, and just sort of a little bit around there, maybe a little dab down there. Okay, so as I said, you know, we can be here all day working on this stuff, getting it exactly right, but we don't want to spend too much of our time doing that. Take that down to 90. Okay, so the opacity is on there. Now what we need to do is show that there is distance between these two. So what we're going to do is create a new layer, and we want it to sit in between these. So we don't want to put it in the folder, we can drag it between, and we're going to call this distance gradient. So we're going to use a gradient to create a distance between these two mountains. So we're going to select our gradient tool from the toolbox, and we want to make sure that we have this one selected, the second one across on the presets, because that gives us our foreground colour or tone, which is white in this case, and our transparency again. Click OK and hold shift, and we're going to drag it to about the height of the mountains. Okay, and now we're starting to create that depth. What we're also going to do is duplicate this layer, okay, and place it in front of our original. Now obviously, you know, we're starting to really miss this detail out. So what we're going to do is take the opacity down to about 50 on the foreground, and I think about the same on the background. So actually what happens is, even though we're taking them both down to 50, they will multiply, obviously, because they're above each other, and so this one now appears further away than this one because of the white. Obviously if they were the same, with, you know, the different colours of them actually helps on that. But actually on this background one, I think we're going to take it up just a little bit to about 60, 70, just to maybe emphasise that a little bit more. Okay, oh, Control Z to undo any mistakes. So we have two pretty cool looking mountains that sit in there quite nicely, that obviously have their textures, some texturing applied to them. And what we're going to do now is start thinking about our foreground. So as you can see, I've added some trees, and you know, I've added some leaves here that we're going to sort of replicate. Now the trees, I've sort of tried to do very similar to the mountains to retain that consistency again throughout the image. Okay. Now if I was going to suggest two improvements to the mountains, I think it would be actually add more detail using the pen tool when we're going around than what I have used in this one here. If you look at the mountain I have in the background here, these sort of interesting shapes have really allowed me to sort of be quite fun with that texture. Okay, so what we're going to do is create a new folder, so go down to the bottom of the layers tab, and we're going to call this one the ground, I think. Okay, Foreground, and within that we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to call that leaves, and this one is going to be our foreground. Okay, so it's going to be the one that's right at the front. So remember we were talking about our colour wheel, and if we load up our split analogus, we want purples, greens, greens, reds and yellows. Now when we're working on bigger objects such as the trees, we can stick to this really well, but we sort of want to mimic perhaps the whole of this range. We definitely do not want any from this range. Okay, it's going to throw off the balance and the style, the visual colour style that we're going for. So sorry, wrong one. So what we're going to do is firstly go to our brush tool, okay, and we're going to select by clicking a small arrow here the calligraphic brushes. Okay, so these are all create nice sort of word style fonts that we can write with, which are used for sort of creating some pretty cool calligraphy. That's the idea of them, but actually they also create some pretty useful shapes that we're going to use. So this is one that I want for the leaves. So at the moment, if I was to draw this on, okay, it just comes out flat. Yeah, really not anything like what we want. So if we go to our brush presets, and we can select shape dynamics, and we can have some jitter in there, and we can change the angle of that jitter. Okay, sort of spiral, and we don't want the roundness, but we also want to perhaps add that intensity in the middle, because here what happens is the cross points creates a line, Now we don't want that line in the middle to be visible, because it looks like we have streaks of tinsel like you get at Christmas. Okay, so if we change the minimum diameter to look quite, not all the way, but it's about 60, I think, we sort of lose that line. I'm hoping when we start to draw across. So if we start to draw now, it still looks like tinsel, but not as thin, not thin in the middle like it's attached to a piece of string. Okay, and what we want to do is add some scattering, and as you can see, that's pretty intense right there. Look at the size of that. So I think we're going to change it down from 1000%. Okay, and I think we can probably have it layered up like that and get away with that. Yeah, there we go. Okay, and that's going to really speed up the process. So even if we're working with a mouse, you know, we can get that line done straight away in 2 seconds rather than doing it individual. So we're not going to add a texture, but we are going to add a color dynamic. So what we want to do is change the hue, and I think that's to about 30%. Okay, and we want to change the saturation jet to 30%. So what we're doing essentially is mimicking what we've got on the colour wheel. We've got our colour and we're spreading out 30 degrees either way, rather than the full 100, because we don't want the whole 100% round. We just want to sort of get that 30% arc, maybe a little bit more, but obviously the colours don't change in the preview, so we have to try, and as you can see, wonderfully it hasn't happened. So let's try and work out why. Okay, because we haven't selected our colour, because we're on white. White, as I said before, is not a colour, and neither is black. So if we go to our colour dabber, pick red, I'm hoping that, there we go. Okay, so again, not really the sort of colours that we're going for. So let's take a look. If we take the saturation down, nope, so it might be the hue, so let's take it to about 20%. Okay, nope. Let's take the it might be that I did it on purple. Let's have a look in a second. So yeah, we don't want that. Well, in fact, if we turn it up, yeah, we definitely don't want that. So let's turn this up. Yeah, we'll keep that on 0. Saturation, we'll set that back down to 0, and we need to sort of play around with this now till we get it right. Okay, so there again, it's not taking too much, for about 15. Okay, and let's try 39. No, okay, let me just change the colour. So let's go for that purple that we were talking about before. Okay, we've got purples and blues, so it's swinging around the other side. So let's go back to yellow, see what we get out of that, or say if we're picking up a bit of green. So let's go down to orange, and let's hope that, okay, so we're picking up greens again. Okay, so let's take this down. Okay, we're sort of getting there a little bit now. Yeah, so this is really sort of, even just the tiniest amount of percentage is having an impact. So once we get to 30, we're starting to get green, so we need to keep it around here. Now I added some, it seems to be sticking to that palette. I wonder if I really want to get some pinks in there, so let's take a look at this. Maybe I need to go from this angle rather than down there. So if we start with pink, let's see what we get. Oh, we're getting blues. So let's take a look. Click OK. Let's just select this background, see if this makes any difference. Nope. So again, we're just going to keep working this. Let's have a look. I would have looked before, but I had to restart my computer the first time that the sound went, because I could not get it back at all. So again, no, this just isn't working out how I planned. Obviously these things happen, and we just have to sort of keep control. If I turn the saturation up, will that? No. What about the jitter? Let's have a look. So we want some really leafy colours, so some browns, some green, not browns, but browns, oranges, some pinks, just to keep intact with the actual scene itself. That's a bit too rich. That's really dark. Look. So, but you can. There we go. We're starting to get there. So you can see how quickly. If I just take the saturation right up, see what happens. Okay. So I think we're going to start. We're starting to get there, I think. So just delete these. Oops, so I think if we take up another percentage, hasn't changed it much. So I do apologise about how long this is taking, but it really is essential that we get this right and don't just settle for what comes out. So take this back down to 15 or 14. I think that's the best we're going to get at this moment in time. I'm just going to quickly erase all of these just to speed it up. And we're going to go back to our brush. I can't remember what. Oh, so I wonder if that actually has anything to do with it. Yeah. Okay. So this is having influence as well. So if we take that to 10, let's have a look at what I have here. Yeah. So I've got it a lot darker down here. So I wonder if the brightness jitter had anything to do with it. There we go. That's why. Okay. Right. So brightness. That's the one. Okay, so we've got these really sort of deep colours. There's a bit of mud in there, potentially some rotting leaves, and we're getting that real sort of autumn wintry sort of effect that keeps my scene intact and looks like the leaves that would have fallen off the sort of trees that I'm designing. So again, once we've done that, once we've got that sorted, we can put our brush tab away and we can literally just paint across. Okay, our foreground in. I mean, look how quickly that's happening. Yeah. Now, what was really important about using a dual brush, and obviously change it from when I said described about the tinsel, is that when you don't, you end up with all these lines in the centre where everything looks like it's coming from that point. And by doing this, we are able to actually hide that fact. Okay. It looks more natural. I would do this. I recommend doing this all the way across. Okay. And as you can see, our mountains are a little bit low, so we could probably bring those up, which if we select our mountains layer, go to our move tool, and no, it's not letting me do that, so we'll probably have to select all the bits themselves. If we just select the bottom one and go to the top, and we can bring those up slightly. Obviously we can take our distant gradients back down. We don't want to. We just want to move that mountain again, which is nuts. Oh, so okay, so if we lock the layers, we should be able to lock that top layer. We should be fine. There we go, and we can start to bring that back up. Okay, again, we can always stretch them out with Control T. If there's any problems later on, we'll just lower them down or remake them. It's not a massive problem. So yeah, we're gonna lock everything in our mountains folder for now. So everything's interrupting that. So once we've got our surface down, we want to add the trees in. Now we want to create this idea of depth, as you can see. Okay, so what we're going to do is create a new folder, and we're going to call this one trees. And I would normally do each tree in a different folder. So we're going to have tree 1, tree 2. And as many as you wish to do. That's if you have trees in your background. So because my word was fungi, and it's all going to be this mushroom environment at the bottom of a forest, one of the things that I'm keen to do is build the architecture into the trees, and this is why I have chosen them. For those of you that are doing buildings, I would look at some of the types of architecture that you wish to use and try and mimic that shape. You can always import the image like we did with the background and fill the shapes in and use those sort of techniques to do it. It's entirely up to you. But for the sake of this one, we're going to draw in our trees. So in our bits and bobs folder, what's really important as well is that we create a palette layer. Okay, so all the colours that we use get stored. Now we could, oh, I've put plate. So what we could do is save our colours to the swatches at the top. But the problem with that is sometimes they don't always save, or your computer might crash and you're going to struggle to get them back. If you save the colours on a layer and save your file, as I recommend you do a lot, so I'm going to quickly save mine. I've saved it over my original, but that's okay, we can delete the stuff away and put it back. For my first tutorial, that is, because it's number 1, not number 2. I would save as a new file, so I would go File, Save As, keep your original tutorial how it is just in case there's problems, create a new folder, and obviously go in there and we can just change this. So I'm just going to keep that as tutorial, edit, and then push OK. There we go, new file. So once we've done that, what we're going to do is start to paint. Now we want to keep this layer option. Obviously our brushes are still going to be painting how we had them, so we're going to turn off the colour dynamics, we're going to turn off the scattering and the texture, and we are literally just going to paint on that red that we used so we can get it back. Okay, now we're also going to use our colour wheel and decide on which colours we're going to use. I'm going to use purple. I'm going to imagine the leaves were yellow. Okay, I'm going to use a purple background. So first thing I'm going to do is select a purple in the middle range. I don't want to go too light and I don't want to go too dark, because then that gives me more control over the image. Just look around there. And what I'm going to do is pull back our original brushes. Okay, so this time I'm going to go basic brushes. I'm going to click append this time because it's about time we started to work in that sense. Now I think we can change the way that the brush, the size of our box if it gets a bit too messy, but we can also use this on the right hand side if you have the painting tab selected like I have up here, and we can scroll down until we get like our sort of original brushes back, and I think a 60 was what I used before, and we're going to start to paint this in. Okay, I've gone a bit too far down there. Now we have to imagine, we all know what a tree looks like, so I imagine it won't be too hard for you to paint one in. Now what I'm thinking about here is this is going to be the start of my level, so what I don't want to do is have the whole thing in. This will be a dead area where you start, where the character can't go further past. So I'm just going to click on do. There we go, and I'm going to add some more in. So, and you know what, I've done that on the palette layer. That is one thing we don't want to be doing. So I'm just going to click select, change it back to normal size, select the whole of that there. Obviously our paint layers here, so it doesn't have any effect. Click edit, cut, or Control X, go down to our tree layer, and we want to go to edit, paste special, paste in place, and it will paste it exactly where it was before, so we don't have to move it. So we'll go back to our brush, we'll go to tree 2, create a new layer in tree 2, and we'll just paint this in. Okay, over here, thinking about your background, what parts do you want visible? But I'm going to paint this one a lot thicker. I want to get the whole tree in. Okay, and we're going to sort of fill that in there. Okay. Obviously, the one difficulty that we have is that this ends like really bluntly, and we don't want to do that. So if we go to our brush dynamics, we can go to not roundness, jitter, control, fade. We can add a fade onto that. Okay, and actually, you know what, we can take away the angle jitter. Remember, it's about 30%, and we take away that jitter, and that should have been on shape dynamics. Size jitter, there we go. No, we don't want a jitter. We do want it to fade though. Okay, so it's not going to let us do that. Okay, so we can just create a smaller brush and actually just take that in. So yeah, we can sort of just take a smaller brush and start to paint in these edges. Okay, so now what we want to do is actually embed this image into the background. Now obviously these mountains at the moment you can't see, but if you imagine on the moving game, these trees will pass and the mountains will, because they're so far away, remain where they are and will become visible as we walk along. I also recommend going to your palette layer and just quickly painting in the mid purple and going back to our original layers. And what we're going to do first of all is create the texture. So similar as before, so make a new layer, click, we want to select the image because we want to keep the same shape. So, and again I've repainted those things back onto the, I've painted this bit here in the wrong layer, so we're going to Control D and we're going to select again this layer, Control X, and we'll go here and obviously paste it in place so it appears right back where it was. Obviously it's made a new layer, so select both and right click and we'll click merge layers, and now we should have, there we go, one solid layer. So we're going to create a shadow, so select the image on the one underneath and make sure you have the layer above selected, and what we're going to do is find a darker colour purple, not too dark, and we're going to paint this on all over. So just select a big brush, and with it selected we're at no risk of painting over the other parts of the image, and then we're going to go up to this layer, create a new one again, select that layer by holding over the image with Control and selecting the picture, waiting for the little box on the hand, so that little box on the hand there, okay, and then you can paint that on. So don't worry about the red, we're going to hide that at the end, and we'll just quickly paint. So obviously if you're using a mouse you might want to use a huge brush because you do it in about 2 clicks. And we're going to go back to our brushes, and this time we are going to go to our dry media brushes. We're going to select Append, and then we're going to scroll down until we get the pastel one that we used earlier, this 136. Okay, and we're going to do that on the eraser. They're still selected, so that's okay, we can use those, and we're going to enlarge the brush. But obviously if we go too large we're going to end up with really blurry parts again, so I recommend just using this sort of size brush. Now again we're getting that repetitiveness because we don't have the scattering and the shape dynamics on there, so we're going to add that back on. Okay, and what we can do is start to create this sort of tree texture. Now almost like a bark on a tree is how I imagine it. As you can see we're going to start to get some clearer parts we can add on. In fact I'm just going to hide that palette layer, and what we want to do is sort of mimic the idea that the tree has a texture and a feeling and bark, you know, sort of moss growing up that. Okay, so again we do have some areas that are a bit more darker than others just from where the brush is rotating and missing those bits. So it is a little bit patchy, but we're going to go over this again with a much bigger brush, painting stuff on, applying that deductive and that additive process, inductive process. So we're going to now select the Paintbrush tool, and we're going to take it up a little bit, and what we're going to do is start to add this idea that there's actually, you know, some areas actually have more than others in terms of the moss. You know how it sort of grows up the one side of the tree more than the other, and, you know, it's okay to add a little bit more in around there, and you know we're starting to add little bits of shadow as well to that, because obviously the light's coming from behind, so this bit would be a lot darker, which is going to feed onto our next sort of task. And we're just going to go back to the other tree, so our layer 5, which we're going to rename shortly, and we're going to start to take this away. Okay, and we're going to start to get that consistency there. Again, you know, there's the amount of things we can do with the brushes is limitless, really, but it just takes time to find the settings that work and really work with them. but try to keep them consistent with the image. One of the things that you also see a lot of is where people have used a lot of different styles in one go, use a lot of different colours, and we really lose that consistency and feeling and texture and surface. But again, don't start painting now, because you'll paint onto the background as I just did, just to demonstrate. So we can select the layer underneath, which will keep that area there, but make sure you're still selecting the top layer, and then we can sort of paint these bits back on. Okay, and yeah, so we have that there, and cool. So Control D deselects. What we're going to do now is start to add some of the highlights. So as this is our start point, this tree here, I'm going to try and leave this as open as possible, because obviously it's my architecture. I want to be able to add a door and some windows and stuff later on. Okay, so let's have a look. We're going to keep those there, and I am going to add some lighting effects. Okay, but we're going to rename these layers first. Oh, so we're going to go cancel that. Tree 1. Colour. So obviously it's the baseline colour that we don't want to erase off. And I've put okay instead of an L. It's okay. It's getting dark here, and the visibility in my room has gone really low. So colour 1. I'm going to go tree texture. And we can go tree 2 colour, and so it's quite a fiddly system, that is. And tree 2 texture. I haven't put it on the other one, but I'm not going to worry about that for now. So we need to add some lighting and some shadow. So again, we're just going to document that colour, just so we know that we have it. So if we get our brush tool, make sure we got our palette layer selected, and just quickly paint on. And this time we're going to select a much lighter image. So actually we're going to go darker. We'll add the shadow first. So in fact, actually we're going to stick with this darker colour, and we're going to go back to our round tip brush that we used to paint the original background layer. This time though, we are going to add a hardness of 50%, because we want it to feather, but we don't want it to look too feathered. Yeah, there we go. So cool. We're going to create a new layer on top, and we're just literally going to paint on that layer. And I don't know why that is not showing. Let's delete that a second. Let's create a new layer on top of there. Okay, it's showing there. There we go. Okay, and then we're just going to paint. The idea is that the sun's behind this, so the light would only be hitting off this side and this side, and not this inside here, unless there was lights in the background behind it. Okay, so again we need to select the area that we're working in, and we're just going to brush all that in. Okay, as I said, if you're using a mouse, computer mouse, please do use a bigger brush. You might struggle with the finer areas of detail, which means you have to make it smaller, but for speed it'll be a lot more efficient. So and as I say, if you haven't got one yet, get that on your Christmas list. It is going to be an invaluable asset to you. So we're going to add a blending mode, and I think an overlay. No, because we're not getting that darkness, or multiply might work. Definitely don't want screen. Darker colour. Multiply. There we go. So again, just getting the bits. It highlights the areas that you may have missed, but that is really intense. So in terms of the dark, it's got a really low value. So we're just going to decrease that down, just to give it. I think it's about 40%. Type 40 in, just to be there. And Control D, and we're going to do the same down here. Select that area again, and just quickly paint that in. Okay, down that background really quickly, and then we can do the same again. Multiply, take it down to 40%, keep it consistent with the other tree. Okay, now what we're going to do is add some highlights. Again, we'll come back to renaming these. So we'll work on the tree that we're on, as it's selected already. We're going to go up, and we're going to pick this lighter sort of violet, like pastel violet, and we're just going to paint this again So because we've got this selected, okay, we'll come back to the palette. We're going to paint this on. I think that's a little bit too big, so we're going to go down to about 20. And yeah, and you know what, I'm going to zoom right in just to maintain that control. Okay, so just sort of paint this in down the edge. Again, if you're using a mouse, it might be difficult. Now we could do like what we did on the planets and add the inner glow, but again we'll get it on this side that we don't want to do. And also don't forget, you know, trees change in shape and volume, and if we had that sort of consistent glow like we had on the planets, it would take away from that natural sort of deviation that happens within trees. Okay, and we want to keep that there. We want to make it look real. We want to, even if it's only really subtly, we want to keep it looking like that. Now what we're going to do is add a screen, turn it to a screen, and actually take it down to about 20%. Kind of like what we did with the planet. So we go to screen, and we're going to go right down to sort of, in fact, 25. I think we do want it to be slightly visible. 30 will do. Okay, and we're going to go back up to our secondary and do the same thing again. So select the bottom layer, and we're going to zoom right in, and we're just going to quickly follow that round. Okay, so just make sure we've got the one layer selected, and yeah, I mean you can push as well, by the way, guys and girls. Control H, which will hide those ants, but it will still remain selected. Okay, as you can see. But sometimes you can forget that it's there, so I'm just going to turn that off, so we can see where we're working from. I'm not really too worried about this side, but you should be if you're doing the full image, which you should. And we're just going to scroll that round, and we're just going to add that back in. Okay, so we've got that in there, and now we're going to add the blending mode, which was screen, and I think it was at 30, and there we go. So now we're going to add another layer, which is the mega highlight, and this one's going to be a little bit smaller again, so down to about 14, and we are literally just going to kiss that edge with that. Okay, again, don't worry too much about the consistency. Trees have really interesting shapes, and the fact that the light changes with that is really cool. In terms of that last run was a little bit rich, but in terms of keeping it looking a little bit real and not perfect. Okay, you'll see some visual graphic styles, particularly if you're doing graphics. You might do one where you have to really stick to that sort of vector, but we want to create something that actually looks quite real. Okay, again we are struggling with this side actually because of the brush before, so we can go back to our layer underneath, just get another brush, and we can just sort of paint back over the top there, just bringing that stuff back in. Yeah, okay, cool. So again, just go back to our secondary, select the colour, take the brush back down to 14, 12 will do, and we can just wrong layer, sorry, create a new layer in here, and then we can start to add that detail in there. So it's only really subtle, something that you probably wouldn't even pick up on, but your eyes, when you're looking at the overall image, will see that and pick it up. Okay, so again we'll just add these bits on. We could probably do the raising that little bit again, so we need to get our tip brush, feed that back in again, and let's take a look at that. Control D, and cool. So we've got our tree. So obviously I said before, ignore these images, and we do want to draw this colour onto our palette just so we've got it for future reference. Now we can hide that. So if you ignore this area, we've got our starting to get our image in, but obviously these parts down here don't sit in very well, and actually there's not much depth being created by these. So what we're going to do is select, bring the palette back up, we're going to select our colour. So if you push Alt, okay, you'll see that we automatically set to colour picker without being down here. So once we have our palette, push Alt, and we can select our original image colour, sorry, which was the red, which we did with these ones down here. Go to our brush mode, select our brush that we were using, which was the flat 60 pixels, and we can turn back on the ones we were using. Wasn't using texture, we were using colour dynamics, but we are going to have to turn back on our jitter, which I think was about 30. So the roundness wasn't on, was it? And we had the size. We have the size jitter. No, we kept that quite low. Well, we had minimum diameter there. We had that up because we had our size jitter up. Okay, so we have size jitter at there and minimum diameter up. And did we have the dual brush? No. We did do the scatter slightly, but we also had it minimum roundness. Let's just have a look at that. There we go. That's cool enough. I'm happy with that. Now what we want to do is firstly, is paint these onto the front of the tree. And now obviously because of the order of our, if we pull this up, that's gonna then we lose this definition. So what we're going to do is keep our original ground down here, and actually just above each tree we are going to add a new layer. Okay, and we're going to start to paint these on. Now as you can see, that's looking quite big. Okay, but what we're going to do is just bring it in slightly, and obviously around there, and create a little bit of variation, just build that up. Okay, we'll get a little bit more depth, and again, we're going to go back to this one here, this other layer, and sort of paint on there. Excuse me. So what we're going to do is, actually the background doesn't look very far there, so we're going to make the brush smaller. Okay, and we're going to add another layer at the back. Okay, you see that size difference? That's going to give it the illusion of depth. When we start your drawing next year, in your second year, you're going to be reapplying this knowledge, okay, into the drawings that you do, so that you're going to do. It's really important to get used to this idea of creating depth now, because your drawings next year are going to be so much stronger. So what we're going to do is go to the ground, and obviously we've got our layer 2, which I think we're going to call foreground, leaves foreground, and we're going to go and create not a new folder, sorry, my mistake, a new layer, and we're going to call this leave. Spell it right, as I said, the lighting has literally gone down. And background, not foreground. And then this time we're going to paint it in, and it should sit quite nicely behind everything else. Okay, so again we need to just tick it behind. There we go, and we can just paint this in, and it will, even though you will, this isn't something you're going to massively notice, but your eyes will feel it. The person who's playing the game's eyes will feel it. Yeah, and it's really subtle, but it's this level of detail that separates the quality of game designs and pieces of art. And I think we're really starting to get this really cool. Again, it's sitting in front of that tree. So if we go back to this layer, sorry, we should get some nice little dinky bits in there. And we can, it's okay to have some longer bits as well, but just for variation, just so it isn't all completely. Obviously here we can see some of the tree coming through. So if we go to our background layer, which I've spelt slightly wrong, so we can go back to that. Actually it's our foreground layer, isn't it, because it's one sitting in front of a tree. We can take our pen back up to 60, and we can just keep painting that stuff back in. Now it's even worth going right down to this front, just so we get some spikes on there showing as well. Okay, and we do that for the tree and get it really sort of embedded. So there we go. We can hide yeah, we can hide our bits and bobs, so we can just take that away. And we have this pretty cool looking foreground, and a pretty cool looking background. Actually, I think the second iteration is looking a lot nicer than the first. Obviously I haven't blended these parts in yet, but that's okay because I was going to add some parts in, but we can always go back. And there you go. As you can see as well, just on this one, I think I've done the layer slightly different there, but if we just hide the ground and the trees, look at this mountain here. I actually painted in some darker, so for those of you that want to create a dry looking planet, you know, that kind of burnt ash effect would be quite nice. And obviously they're the two sort of mountains that I did earlier. Okay, I really prefer the first pastel we used to the second in this example, but I do really like this effect as well, so it's up to you. So things to consider, if you look at the colour scheme, okay, I haven't really touched on the yellow, but when I start to add the architecture parts, that's when I'm really going to hit it. And I would, but we can see those down here. Obviously, because I've stuck within a certain area of that palette, you know, the consistency of the image is looking pretty strong. As I said, what we were getting were all these sort of warm blue, greens, brown, you know, and a brown for the mud and stuff, and it was just too much. But what I'd like you to do is have an experiment with the brush tool as well, see what textures that you can try and create. I think this one for creating some sort of messy leaf ground forest floor looks really good. So that's all we're going to do for this week. I think if I have time, I'm going to create another tutorial for the architecture, but you should be getting that next week. Okay, please use your mood boards on your own and upload your results to the OneDrive. Okay, thanks for that. See you all.